966.
Richard, let's get to it, man. What's your one big thing this week?
My one big thing, it's for this episode, is kind of a in case you missed it topic. As we have discussed previously on the 966, this past summer was quite the diplomatic whirlwind for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. As we know, U.S. President Joe Biden, Turkey President Recep Erdogan, Egyptian President Sisi, numerous others traveled to Saudi Arabia to meet with him. He, in turn, traveled to Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and France, high-level meetings. And when you look at it, again, something we've discussed on the 966, combined with the Al Ula Declaration in January 2021, which was sort of a coming together of the GCC, negotiations with Iran, they've had five sort of summits, quote unquote, and continued communications, growing rapprochement with Iraq, increased coordination between GCC states. These past 18 months have really firmly established MBS as a pivotal regional and global foreign policy figure, possibly the pivotal foreign policy figure in the region. And this is the ICYMI moment. Interestingly, there was another country, MBS, actually took the time to make an official visit to this summer, not once, but twice. And that country?
Greece.
Yes. Sorry, I stepped on you.
No, it's okay. Don't we all wish we could have visited Greece twice this summer, by the way?
It would be nice. It would be nice. Yes, Greece. That of the minuscule $176 million in trade with Saudi Arabia in 2021. Greece, with the $216 billion GDP, which is about a quarter of Saudi Arabia's, and places Greece 26th out of the 27 EU member economies. Greece, with roughly 10 million people, which places them again 25th out of the 27 EU member states. Yet Mohammed bin Salman visited Greece twice this summer. The second time announcing, quote, "This means a lot to Saudi Arabia and me, and I promised Greece that I would not return empty-handed. We now have cooperation that will be a turning point for our countries in the entire region." I mean, interesting what's going on here. And some really interesting things are going on, as it turns out. First, some context. Yes, Greece is at the tail end of EU states in terms of GDP and population, but it is a member, becoming the 10th member of the current 27 members in 1981, which means it is integrated economically and politically into a group that represents about 450 million people, more than $17 trillion in GDP, and with most of those member states having fairly high human development index scores. Second, and this is important, and if you don't look at the map, you sort of don't, it doesn't really jump out at you. Athens is less than 1,000 miles from Neom Bay. And along with nearby Cyprus, which MBS also visited this summer, it's a natural point of entry to the Southern European Union. Cyprus, by the way, is 450 miles from Neom Bay. Third, Saudi Arabia and Greece have already agreed to invest close to $850 billion to build a subsea, $850 billion to build a subsea and terrestrial fiber optic data cable project that will link Singapore with Italy and France, passing through Riyadh and Saudi Arabia, and of course, Greece. This, quote, East to Med data corridor will be developed by Saudi Arabia's STC and Greek telecom satellite leader TTSA. It's expected to be in place by the end of 2025. Fourth, Saudi Neom recently announced it intends to produce 650 tons per day of green hydrogen by 2026.
Yep.
Not surprisingly, Saudi Arabia, along with the UAE, is pushing the EU to make some long-term contractual commitments to purchase green hydrogen from the Gulf. And while the EU, the European Council President, Charles Michel, says the contract offers aren't yet sufficient, which makes sense. It's hard to price this right now. The EU energy ministers will discuss this prospect, when they meet on September 30th. Finally, when MBS was in Greece the second time in July, he was there in June and then again in July, a Supreme Strategic Cooperation Council was launched along with the signing of 40 MOUs. At that time, Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis stated that, quote, We have a historic opportunity to turn Greece into a hub for Europe for hydrogen. That is a game changer for both of us. With the telecommunication grid, we are going to change the position of Greece and Saudi Arabia, and we are going to support Europe, especially South and West Europe, with much cheaper and more efficient energy, unquote. So amid the torrent of news on Saudi Arabia every day, the point of this one big thing is don't sleep on Greece. This is a sort of a fascinating geostrategic play by Saudi Arabia that could accelerate numerous key aspects of Vision 2030, including digitization. Nailed it. I stumbled over that last time, big time.
Digitization. Yeah, it's a tough
Digitization,
one.
yes. You have to hit that T.
Yeah, you do. You gotta lean into it.
Telecommunications, data, clean and renewable energy, and efficiently access the huge and prosperous EU market.
Richard, that was so good. This is why the 966 is so good. I mean, when you mentioned that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had visited a EU country twice this summer, and it was Greece, I sort of thought the first thing that I thought about was the subsea cable, because when that was announced, it was sort of like, whoa, this is a huge investment. And, you know, you can actually kind of see the direct immediate benefit when this is finished. And then thinking about it, as you were talking, the history here, I mean, there's so much going on. None of these things are really top of the headline of any day of news on Saudi Arabia. But when you put it all together like this, and you have the visits by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman going twice this summer, and then you take into context some of the defense cooperation that they've had going on. Right. Greece loaned Saudi Arabia a Patriot missile defense system and sent 130 personnel as well to Saudi Arabia. This was back when the war in Yemen was spilling over the borders a little bit, and Saudi Arabia really needed missile defense. So that there was that. And then it's just, as soon as you mentioned it, the green hydrogen thing. I mean, right now with the war in Ukraine and fall and soon winter looming for EU nations, and there's going to be a huge energy crunch there just to heat houses, and they're scrambling to try to combat that or figure out what to do without Russian oil. You sort of have Saudi Arabia saying, hey, I mean, it's, you know, it's tough to get long-term contracts right now to agree to anything, but we've got a plan to get you off of, you know, energy from Russia. And this is green hydrogen. So we're sort of looking for you to give us some commitment, because we're the one putting all the money down to actually build and develop this. We need a market for it. And, you know, then you started, when you were talking about that, I went to go look at the map, and you mentioned it. You know, Greece is really close to Saudi Arabia and Neom Bay. And that's probably where a lot of this energy will enter the European Union when it's ready. So it does all make sense. I mean, that's all I'm doing is just trying to, you know, just do a little clap for that one big thing, because when you put it all together like that, you know, Greece and Saudi Arabia, you know, low key, a huge strategic alliance coming up in the coming year. I mean, this is huge. So it was really good. Very interesting.
You make a good point too, because that loaning of that Patriot battery along with personnel came at a very anxious time for Saudi Arabia. It was really good, really well received. But I think it's strategic too for Saudi Arabia. And I mentioned, you know, Greece's, you know, GDP and population. It's you know, it's not a powerhouse nation, yet obviously a member of the EU and integrated, you know, in terms of networks and economic pipelines and telecommunications, that sort of thing, with a larger EU. It's smart for Saudi Arabia to go for something like this, not only because it's you know, geographically appropriate, but also, you know, Saudi Arabia is in a much stronger position vis-a-vis Greece than it would be if you're going to Germany and saying, hey, let's do this. Because Germany's obviously GDP and economy is vastly larger than Saudi Arabia's. They'd like Saudi investment. They don't need it. Greece, on the other hand, is, like Mitsotakis said, the prime minister says, oh, we're delighted about this. Mm-hmm. This is awesome. Come, let's do this together. And so the reception is different, and the leverage, I think, is different. So anyway, I think it's a curious, interesting, and smart geostrategic play by Saudi.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of friction in 2020, I think, maybe 2021, when Saudi Arabia's relationship with Turkey was not as good as it is today. They've had a big détente. So When there was Greek-Saudi military cooperation, local press in Turkey was a little bit nervous about it, just because, the sort of strategic position of Greece via Turkey. But obviously things have been smoothed over between Turkey and Saudi Arabia. They've worked it out. And so there's not that friction anymore. Richard, a group of golf investors also bought a huge resort on the Greek island of Crete in 2014. I'm sorry, Corfu Island in 2014. It was a golf fund, but they paid $550 million for that island and the resort, and that was right after the Greek financial crisis. So they probably got a good deal on that. That was just like the last thing I wanted to mention on that. But who knows?
But
It'd be nice to visit that.
It's another salient point you make with regard to Turkey, because Saudi Arabia, is as with the U.S., vis-a-vis Russia and China, hedging all its bets. Yes, there's renewed diplomatic activity with Turkey, and Recep Erdogan came, and MBS visited Turkey as well. But again, it's weighed with maintaining good relationship with the Greece and Cyprus, which obviously do not have good relations with Turkey. And it's also in light of, Turkey is trying to assert some rights in Eastern Mediterranean in terms of energy and that sort of thing. So Saudi Arabia is playing its cards, I think, intelligently, balancing this with that, and again seems to be thinking about the long term here. So it's a fascinating play. It's something we want to watch.